How's it growing, everybody? I just had to get that dab in me, the flavors. Like when you really hit some really nice bubble hash, like those terps. Yeah, save the terps, right? We're all about those terpenes, all about those flavors, and you know what? The show today is going to be about saving those terps in a way, but we're saving them in a different way. It's with lighting. We're going to talk more about lighting, and I think it's really good because a lot of people know I've been going down that LED pathway, talking all kinds about lighting, talking about PPFD, talking about moles and how much a plant can handle per day, and everybody's seen me with my meters and stuff like that. And this kind of going down this huge rabbit hole of lighting because I keep saying it's like the green rush for the cannabis industry right now. Everybody's switching over to LEDs. We're seeing better efficiency. We're seeing bigger yields. We're seeing just this killer weed. And you know what? I find it really intriguing of how many companies are out there and how long they've been around. And then we start doing some research and we know what's made in the US, what's made in Canada, what's made in China, what's assembled, where things are manufactured and stuff. And it was really, really great to actually kind of go down that rabbit hole. And then we had some great people actually contact us. And we actually got a hold, like guys from California LightWorks got a hold of us and says, you know what, like we see that what's happening in the industry. And well, I started watching these videos online from California LightWorks and seeing where the technology was. And I was like, wow, it's pretty cool. So we actually got a hold of, Craig Adams got a hold of us. And I don't know if you've been there. We'll talk more about what you can actually view a lot of the products later. But we have a special guest today. So we're going to talk more about what he's got going on, where he started in the industry. We even have a little video to talk about what he's going in his warehouse, what's happening down there. We'll get into that. But I kind of really want to welcome you guys. Craig Adams, welcome you to Pot TV. And, nice to see you here. And thanks for joining us on this fabulous Friday. Just tell us more about who you are and what kind of brought you into the industry. Like my whole show was, where did you start, where you're growing, and how you're going for the future. And the future is, we know, but I want to know where things started with you, and tell us a little bit more about your company and what you're doing.
Sure, pleasure to be here. Well, we started this company in 2008, and it was originally, it was right after the big recession in the US where the economy really went to hell. And about that time, I was trying to start a new business involving LEDs, but most of the market collapsed and nobody was investing in new businesses. And so about that time, we started, my wife said, well, why don't we start a little grow operation in the back and build a shed? And, and I was just thinking, well, what a crazy idea. But I thought, all right, whatever you want. So we ended up building a nice little grow room out there. And it was actually quite an experience. And we saw how much money people were spending on equipment and how technical it all was. And right about the same time, I'm thinking, well, what about LEDs for a glow light? So it kind of was a combination of those two ideas. And I started, I'm not a technical guy as far as electronics. So I started trying to build a light, source it from China, see what I could put together. And in the middle of that, I met my partner, George, who was trying to do the same thing. And he's an electrical engineer. And he goes, look, I want to make it. I want to produce it. I know everything about LEDs, electronics. I know nothing about growing or about the market. And I said, perfect. Let's get together and start designing some LEDs. And I also had a hydroponic equipment shop. So I had a lot of growers in my community. So,
So you were a grower. You're a grower at heart. You got in the industry. Before you got in the industry, you're saying you were a grower. You had your own little thing going on, which is
kind of started at the same time. And you never know how you fall into these things. So it was the combination of LEDs and growing kind of simultaneously. And I developed into a hydroponic store and a whole distribution thing that we built. We flowered a couple of times, which is okay, but it was hard about the smells of the neighbors. And we actually found we liked nursery business, so we started doing clones. So for the last 10 years, we've been selling clones to growers all over California. And that's kind of given me good access to growers to test lights, to try different formulas. So kind of started that way. And with my partner, who was an electrical engineer, we could really design the LEDs from the ground up based on our own technology, our own factory. We tried to avoid China as much as possible. to the extent that we can do things locally or ourselves, we do that. But that's kind of how it started. You know, those days, we were one of the very few people trying to push LEDs. There was maybe a couple other people out there, but it was really limited.
I'm just looking. I have the first LED grow light. I started growing with LEDs in 2008, and it's these round ones, and it's a 3-part. And I was trying to look for it, but you know, I should have grabbed it, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, like the good old UFOs, the round ones from China.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'll be showing it off to other people. They're laughing at me, right? I think it's cool.
Yeah,
So.
and you know, the problem then was they were really underpowered, you know, and the Chinese are saying, oh, you can replace 1,000-watt HPS with a 100-watt LED and crazy stuff like that. People tried it and it just didn't deliver. It wasn't enough light output to really compare to, like, let's say an HPS or metal halide. So we really designed all the way from the beginning. We wanted an LED that you could flower with and get serious results, as good or better than HPS. So we've kind of done that from the beginning. So it means really putting a lot of power, using high power LEDs. Obviously, it was extremely expensive in those days to get the same light output, you know, as an HPS. But, you know, every year the light output in LEDs has gone up and the cost has gone down. So we've come a long way, you know, since then, where we see right now LEDs are at least twice as efficient now as HPS. So it's really quite a revolution.
Are you, like you said, you were using, are you still importing from China or getting any importing parts for your products? Because I know you do a lot of building. We're going to get more into that, like, because you mentioned that. I'm just kind of curious because I know there's some, I watched some of your videos and stuff, so I'm pretty cool about how you manufacturing with the aluminum and how that all comes together. But I mean, you know, certain parts are only made in certain parts of the world, so I understand that too.
Yeah, we unlike a lot of people, we started really designing and producing our own electronic circuits. So the LED boards, the controller boards, and we even built our own driver. So most of our competitors don't do that. They buy a driver from China. They might even buy.
Meanwhile, drivers seem to be the popular ones I see.
Yeah, most everybody else was using those. We actually designed our own. About the only thing that we're really forced to go outside is the LEDs themselves. There's not many LED factories based in the US, but everything we do is Osram, which is a German company. They've got factories in China and Malaysia and Europe. So it's kind of a worldwide sourcing.
You talk about the Osram, you talk about Philips, you talk about Creed, you talk about those top shelf ones, and then you got your bottom of the bins people talk about too.
Yeah, exactly. So and those big companies have factories in multiple places in the world. So, you know, lately the tariffs in China are a lot higher. So a lot of people are switching out to Malaysia or different places around the world. So I would say that's the main component. We can't do that ourselves, and you can't, nobody producing those in the US.
I think they invented it. So, I mean, it's kind of like
it's, yeah, I don't know why, but nobody's producing the actual diodes here, but it's all based on mostly US technology, et cetera. So I try to build as much as we can under one roof in California. So that allows us to do a lot of custom stuff with spectrum control, really tuning the power for cannabis. That's all we do. It's always been all about cannabis. Cannabis is
research that you've been doing, because that was one thing I've seen when I was watching those videos is how long have you been doing that research for the growers before we get more into your lighting and stuff?
Really since 2008, you know, and right from the beginning, you know, we just started. The first thing we did was build a few hundred units, and I gave them out like half price to all my growers, all the customers from my hydro shop. You know, I said, try this for 90 days. You could give it back. I'll give you a refund. Let me see how it does. And it kind of started like that. So we got a lot of great feedback on what it could do, what it couldn't do. So even up to this year, we still do the same thing. We come out with some new designs where we think the technology will get better results, but it goes straight out to growers, you know, for 3 months, 6 months before we sell anything. So we get a lot of feedback and, you know, a lot of real world results as far as reliability, as far as yield, especially.
Cool. That's really cool. I know you, on top of grow lights, so we'll talk about that control that you have for those lights. You also have this Fanny Pure, like a UVC kind of light for cleaning and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's we're big believers, number one, in UVB, using UVB to boost THC levels, especially towards the end of the, flowering, which is very similar. UVB is very similar to UVC. UVC, though, is much more effective at killing virus and germs, mold, mildew. It's even stronger than UVB. So we really developed the UVC, the Sanipure since COVID virus, because it's a really effective surface cleaner. You don't need to use chemicals. It gets into, you can use it where chemicals don't make sense. And there have been applications even in horticulture with UVC for quite a while for sanitizing a bench if you've got concerns about mold spores, sanitize your tools, and even on the plant, it will kill especially powdery mildew spores on the plant.
So, I mean, right now, as I was bringing it up, is, I mean, it's a huge thing. COVID, it's a disease. It's touching viruses, and we're seeing that. Like, are you seeing a big influx? I have a Clean Light Pro. I also have a Wizard wand. So I have UVC, UV. I wear a mask. I go in full shade because everybody's freaking out. So I understand that, but I like the product. That's why I want to make mention of it. I mean, it's basically it's killing viruses. It's killing bacteria. With just an easy, I always say about 12 inches of wood, quite slow. Do you recommend it for your grow room for on your plants and all that kind of, or do you, I set mine in my duct.
A lot of people in the nursery industry use UVC to sterilize things. Like I say, especially like in a greenhouse where you're worried about mold spores, especially on your fungus or mold spores, like on your scissors or your various tools or on benches where you're working. So that's a really nice way to just, scan the light over killing everything without using chemicals. Like I say, it's effective on plants too, but you have to be very careful because any long exposure will kill a plant. So you also have to protective glasses and protect your skin because it's pretty powerful. It can damage living cells. So you have to be a bit careful.
Yeah, I always say, like, whenever using that light, that's why I said I actually I had a mask that I would put over.
Right.
Like when you're in any light, and especially with the LED grow lights, I've been talking, this is a subject I don't even have written down, but I'm going to get into it. I'm talking about the glasses, and I know with LED lights, with these full spectrum LEDs and all the different spectrums, I mean, we got to start looking at our eyes too. I think it's important at the same time because we've always gone into our grow rooms with metal highlight HPS. All of us old growers don't wear glasses, but these new LED lights, they're so intense and so powerful. I mean, how much damaging is that to our eyes right now? I haven't even really mentioned that, but what's your thoughts on that with your lights? Are they?
There's two things. Number one, the problem, you can look into an HPS or MH bulb and it won't do that much damage. If you look straight into a diode, because the light is directional, it's like a laser beam going in your eyes, and it can be really damaging if you look up into the LED, and that's true for any LED, any color. You really don't want to look directly into the diodes because they're coming straight at you. The other thing is that we're a big believer in spectrum control and playing with red-blue ratios to push yield, to push chemical profiles. But so you have kind of a purple light. Those are very difficult to work under. You're working in the grow room. The red really screws with your eyes, and you can't see the natural color of the plant. So we always offer, we also have white LEDs where you put on view mode, where it's just all nice, clean white while you're working in the garden. Then you go back to the full spectrum when you leave. Or you can use LED glasses, which the LED glasses filter out most of the red. So you don't, the red kind of, it gives you a headache and kind of, you see double after a while. So there's nice specific LED glasses that make it look like normal white spectrum.
I do use Method 7's LED ones, and I
Yeah,
have.
that's what we use all the time. I was doing so many trade shows.
It's funny. I just found.
I love those. Those are great. The LED version, yeah, the LED version Method 7s are great because we're doing trade shows all over the place, and it's the LED shining down into a white grow tray. And you're there for 3 days, it blinds you. So we're basically wearing the Method 7 like during the whole show.
That's pretty cool. So I actually have written down here. I was actually, and because I've been taking a look at mostly a lot of my friends. A lot of them are doing micro grows. A lot of them have licensed producers. They big up and grows. And I was looking at your GH Pro 340, and I kind of want to talk more about that because it's got this wireless control. It's got some cool stuff actually. It's kind of getting into talking about that pro light that you actually have going on.
Sure. Well, that's an interesting light. Basically, it's more for a greenhouse environment, but also it's a great indoor light, even a great light on shelves, a warehouse light, but it's especially designed for greenhouse. Number one, it's long and linear, so you
Yeah.
minimum shadow effect. A square or rectangular fixture will block a lot of the sun. So it's a sleek linear, which usually you mount it under a truss, so you get very little added shadow. They're all they're passively cooled, so there's no fans or moving parts. You can even pressure spray them, to wash out any dust or overspray. But the biggest thing there is, number one, it's has a wireless Bluetooth with spectrum control, so you can control one or 1,000 lights from an app on your smartphone. So the white is separate from the red, so you get a little variation between veg and bloom. You can also dial it in for seasonal variations, and it saves the program right in the light itself. So you don't need external timers or breakers or contactor panels. You can also tie that to a Wi-Fi and control those lights from anywhere, over the internet. So it's a lot simpler to install, much wider control, and you can do sunrise, sunset scenarios. You can have emphasis in red while you're in bloom, etc. Also, it's a integrated driver, so a lot of our competitors have a separate driver. You have to mount that somewhere separate from the light, like those big Meanwhile drivers. And those, number one, it kind of doubles the installation cost, but also gives you another big thing that's creating a shadow. So these are very, very, then also you can piggyback them. So you can get up to 10 lights on a single power outlet. So now, that's another thing. Most of our competitors, you got one plug, one driver, and one LED for each fixture, which right. In operations, especially in a greenhouse where you're up high in the rafters or on the trusses, that can get really expensive for electrical wiring. Or you just, one power drop, 10 lights, all piggyback together, all wirelessly controlled. So vastly simpler installation and much cleaner control.
The reason why I brought it up is we were talking about that purple and red with the sunglasses, and this is what was really keyed on with this GP Pro I have over here, purple and red sunset and stuff. So it kind of fit its place because we were talking about now you're outside greenhouse and looking at that. I was looking at that controller hub, and that's what you were talking about, is how you can control that spectrum with all of these lights. I thought that was kind of interesting. Like I run a TrollMaster little system, but it runs in my room, environmental. This really just runs the whole spectrum and everything, where you were talking about that blue at the end of flowering, which I thought was really intriguing. But
right from the beginning, we always had variable spectrum control. Especially with cannabis, where you're where you're going from veg and then flipping over to flower. You don't want the same spectrum in veg and flower for obvious reasons. People used to use metal halide to veg, and then you'd flower with HPS, and you'd go back to metal halide at the end because it had that rich blue, and you kind of got better smells and terpenes, etc. So with LED, you can just do that automatically. So we have a veg spectrum, which is much higher blue ratio. We back off the red, so you get shorter spacing between the nodes. You get much bushier, compact plants. Then you flip it over and you actually back off the blue in flower and pump up the red. Now because too much blue in a flowering light actually reduces your yield. That's why metal halide was never a great flowering light.
What I always understand, what you got is that metal halide blue at 30% would actually stunt your plants and get to leaf you get, your leaves kind of shrink up a little bit more.
Well, in most plants, red induces a lot of stretching, and it also, but that's what really drives fruit and flower photosynthesis, where blue really it reduces that stretching, and you get a much better formed plant with less spacing in the nodes. The trouble with red and like HPS is you don't get great chemical profiles. Colors and smells are more driven by blue. You get a much nicer chemical profile on lab reports when you finish in blue. The trouble is blue will give you less yield. So we have a program where you veg with a high blue, low red ratio. You switch over to flower. You back the blue off. You hit it heavy with red through most of flower. Then you finish at the end. You back off the red and go high blue. That really improves all your chemical profiles. And then we have a separate UVB light, which you use, which especially drives THC levels just from the last week or two of flowers. So it's kind of a complete package through that whole life cycle of the plant.
So now I'm going to tell you what I'm doing right now. Whoa, something just came up in front of me, touched on my laptop. So right now I'm actually inducing far red in the last couple weeks of flower. And now you're telling me to actually put more blue, which now we talk about blue is more inhabiting cell expansion and the red enhances cell expansion. So I'm thinking, okay, so maybe I'm doing this wrong because I'm just learning over here, right? I'm really learning LED lighting. I'm learning this technology. I'm just like sponging this all in, trying to get this information out. So as you're talking, I'm like, hey, slow down here for a second. So I'm going to take these I'm using Alias, HS Matrix 420s. I use Alias LEDs. And I'm thinking maybe I'll take those ones that have more blue and throw them in over my tables this last week. That seems like a great idea because
like I say, you don't want a lot of blue in most of blue because it really screws up your yield. But at the end, you finish in blue, it's really a quality enhancer. But UVB is interesting because if you look at the cannabis plant, the cannabis plants, which were more around the northern and southern hemisphere, don't create THC. They're basically hemp. But when those plants migrated more towards the equator or in like very high elevations where you have high light levels of UVB, like naturally, that UVB inhibited the plant's ability to go to seed and reproduce. It actually damaged their DNA. So as those plants migrated towards those high UVB areas, it actually evolved this UVB filter that when it senses a high level of UVB, it cranks out this chemical, which actually coats the trichomes, and it's a very effective UVB filter. That chemical is THC. So the only reason cannabis is psychoactive, it's a protection against UVB. And for any of the plants that evolved where there was no high UVB, they never evolved the ability to create THC. So basically, you can trick the plant into upping that THC level by introducing a certain amount of UVB, but only in the last week or two. Once you've got buds and there's resin, you introduce just enough UVB that will stimulate the plant to crank out a higher THC level. So you can actually boost THC levels by maybe 25%. UVB. So I think most growers understand that. But far red is really interesting too. That's a totally different thing. Number one, almost all plants have they measure the level of regular red to far red, and it kind of tells the plant if it's in the shade or not, or if it's day or night. That's how they see the daylight and everything. So if, give you an example, if a plant's growing under a tree, it's not getting much of the deep red because the tree is absorbing that's the peak of photosynthesis, that deep red. And it doesn't filter through to the plant under the tree. But far red is not absorbed by photosynthesis. So the far red goes straight through the leaves in the tree. It hits the plant. The plant says, oh, far red is higher than normal red, I'm in the shade, and it'll stretch. It'll stretch and it'll go out to the side trying to find, like, I'm looking for the sun, right? So a lot of growers, like for flowers, they want long stem flowers, they'll use far red and it stretches the stems. So I mean, that's kind of one interesting thing. It will elongate most plants, but it also uses that for a signal that tells it when the sun went down. Because, you know, in sunlight, far red is about equal to deep red. When the sun goes down, it loses the deep red first, and then it loses the far red. That's how it knows the sun just went down. And it's kind of waiting, because it goes into different metabolism at night than it does in the daytime. But it takes it's like a 2-hour lag. When the sun goes down, it takes about 2 hours to flip over to nighttime. And in the morning, same thing, it flips back when that red ratio comes back. So growers use that far red trick, use far red at the end of the day to put the plant to sleep faster. So a lot of people...
Guys, at 15 minutes, all my lights go off, and for 15 minutes, I have one far red light in the middle of my room.
Exactly.
More minutes before my lights go off.
And basically what that does is it switches over to nighttime mode, like right away, instead of taking gradually 2 hours. So theoretically, you can, let's say if you normally have 12-hour dark period, you can shorten the dark period to, let's say, 10 hours, meaning that you can go to harvest quicker. So you can speed up harvest time. And a lot of growers, we have a special far red light just for that, to help you shorten harvest time. You get, you do that transition faster. But the problem we found, though, is that every strain is different about, because you want to shorten the dark period without it reverting to veg, right? And we found some plants can go really a lot shorter dark period without reverting to veg. Other plants will revert right away, which is the last thing you want, right? You don't want them to go back to veg at all. So it's kind of a tricky thing, but it works pretty good once you get it dialed in.
It's very interesting because I'm playing with that as we're talking. Like I'm just doing this because I've been able to actually go down this pathway, really looking at the LED technology, looking at the amount of companies that are out there. And like I just have in front of me right now, I got, here's all my LED stuff. I'm writing about micromoles, moles, how many, PPFD, PFD are really understanding all of this and then where to set your lights. And that's the best thing about LED technology right now is you're able to start actually playing that. And that's something that you're doing right now. And to really, for people to understand, I mean, now that we're getting into this nitty gritty, I really want people to see this video that you've done on what you got going on in your factory and how this whole thing is being built right now. Then I can come back and talk more about the solar system LEDs, some of your more technology, and kind of get into that. So we're going to kind of go off to this video right now so you guys can get a better idea of actually what they're doing down at California LightWorks. So here you guys go.
So this is really the heart and soul of our LED fixtures at California LightWorks. We start with very long aluminum extrusions based on our own custom dies. These are then cut into individual pieces which form the entire structure of the fixture. It's all solid aluminum. It's all a massive heat sink to keep everything cool. It's really the heart and soul of our design to run the LEDs as cool as possible. That requires a very large quantity of aluminum and very efficient mounting and cooling. So we bring these into the factory in very long bars. They're cut to shape. Then we use computerized CNC machine to drill the holes and all the proper alignments. So one of the main advantages we have at California LightWorks is we actually make 100% of our LEDs in our factory here in Canoga Park in California. This is the beginning of the electronics process. This is the raw circuit board. It goes through a printing and a stenciling operation where the electronic circuit is printed on the board. Next, it'll pass to our pick and place machine, which actually shows picking each individual LED and placing it. This gives us a number of huge advantages. Number one, any problems we can correct instantly. We're right here, we're producing daily. Also, we can do custom spectrum, we can do custom designs. Most of our competitors are buying off the shelf in China, or even the US made, they're sourcing them to outside factories. So the next key step is bonding the circuit board to the heatsink. This is a permanent chemical and mechanical bond. It's the key to running the LEDs cool. Here we're very proud of our workforce. Most of these guys have been here at least 5 years. We've been producing LED grow lights since 2008. We have one of the most experienced labor forces in the industry. The next key step in building our LED grow lights is the driver. This is the heart of the electrical supply to the LEDs themselves. This is our own custom design that we've been making for over 6 years now. It's one of the most bulletproof designs in the industry. Frequently, cheaper models, especially from China, this is what tends to fail. It's very compact and it's mounted right onto our heatsink. It becomes an internal part of the fixture itself. It's also part of the cooling mechanism, so you have a very cooling, fully integrated driver system. Another key feature of our solar system series LEDs are digital spectrum control. This is a control board that goes in every fixture, which our own custom design, which we also make here in our California factory. And it communicates with a controller, which we also produce here. Circuit board mounted to a touch screen. It's all mounted onto the fixture. This allows the controller to communicate with the fixture for programming the day, week, or manually, or a wide range of different spectrum mixes for whatever phase of growth you're in. The final step is final assembly, where we add our extended life fans. These are rated for 50,000 hours. We feel very strongly that the key to driving LEDs at their optimum level, as well as long lifespan, is using active cooling with fans. These are very simple to replace, even the user. They're rated for the same life as the LEDs. That way, you'll have a much longer lifespan on the LEDs themselves, a much cooler running unit. The side panels are added, the end caps are added, and we're good to go. So the final step, every single unit is tested 100% and burned in, packaged up, and shipped to the best growers around the world. Up to 5-year warranty and satisfaction guaranteed.
So what's been really cool was actually being able to show people like what you're doing down in California and how you're manufacturing. I thought it was that nice big piece of aluminum, and that shows to me, because I'm a glazer by trade. I build things out of aluminum, and that shows value to me. I was like, okay, you got this big chunk of aluminum.
You know, the keys to running LEDs efficiently and for a long time is if you can keep them cool. You can run them cool, they'll last. They get too hot, the lifespan goes way, way down. So that's why we use massive blocks of extruded aluminum. Much more so in China, they'll use little thin aluminum things and they work great out of the box, but very quickly they're running so hot that the LEDs degrade a lot faster. So for us, that's the key. That starts with the heatsink, big, massive chunk of aluminum, keep the LEDs cool.
Yeah, I saw it was pretty cool, and then how you kind of you're generally building them. You're not just like assembling, putting a few parts together. You're actually building these things, which is fantastic to see. Creating jobs, creating an industry. I was looking at the solar system light, that 275 veg, and how it's replacing. We were talking about veg and how that's replacing the 400 watt metal highlight. Tell me more about some of these different series that you have and these lights. And you know, I mean, as like I said, I have 3 different types of LEDs. I have a veg, I have a flower, and then I have a far red right now, and I got some different LED lights. So tell me more about what you got.
We have kind of 3 product lines. Our most important one is solar system. That's mostly indoor light, indoor grows. It's probably one of the best selling in the world. I mean, the main theory behind it is 3 channels. So you have 3 channel spectrum control. There's blue, white, and red. and you can dim each channel 0 to 100%. And then we offer a controller, a small touchscreen controller. So you can program your whole grow right on one little screen. You know, this many weeks in veg, you can dim down the overall power, up the blue, reduce the red. Then you can slowly transition as you get closer to flower. Rather than swooping it over in one thing, you can slowly lower the blue and come up with the red. And you can actually let nature have the day start to get shorter, the night get longer. So when you're at the day you would have flipped over, the plants are already in flower. They've gone like naturally. And then you can have automatic sunrise, sunset every day, which gently brings up the lights, gently brings them down so the plant doesn't get that shock when you turn off or on the lights, which it kind of stunts them for a little while. They go, oh, what just happened? Much more in a gentle transition. Like I say, you also have the ability to come back to the blue at the very end and really enhance those smells and chemical profiles. Then we sell, like I say, a separate UVB light, a separate far red light, so you can do all those scenarios kind of together in one kind of smooth program. So that's probably, that's our biggest selling indoor light. We do a lot of commercial installations, a lot of high-end, hobby growers and tent lights too. It's really solid. There's like a 200 watt, a 400 watt, and an 800 watt. So you've got various power ratios for the space you want to cover. Then we have, like I told you, the Greenhouse Pro, which is a long linear, where you're really looking at doing, it's especially good for large commercial growers, especially greenhouse or large indoor, where you're doing them in long arrays and you can control them all wirelessly. Then you have 2-channel spectrum control. Then the last line is called Solar Extreme. It uses the same heat sink and the same configuration as Solar System, which you saw in the video, but it's a cob. It's a cob LED. So
that's your 100 UV one, isn't it?
What's that?
I was going to put that your most powerful light. I have one written down here, your most powerful light.
Well, cob LEDs are a little different. In a cob, you're using a big LED board, and it has all kinds of little tiny diodes, and then they coat them all with phosphorus, so they look kind of yellow. But there you can do a lot of tiny diodes in a big space. So there's a number of advantages to do that, but the one disadvantage is that you don't have spectrum control. On solar system, it's individual diodes, so you can raise or lower each diode, and each diode is a specific color. With cob LEDs, kind of like fluorescent lights, you're using a phosphor coating to give you that light spectrum, which is fixed, and so it's a fixed, more full spectrum light. But it's kind of fun. You can tweak the mix of the phosphor that you coat the cob LED, so you can push it further to the red, further to the blue. You can actually shape how that light spectrum curve looks with a cob LED. So we do that mostly for tent. It's much less expensive. They're about half the cost of a solar system, but it's a fantastic tent light. And that's also like in the 200, 400, 800 watt version. Especially for tent, that's been kicking ass. So that's kind of the 3 series we do.
I found with a lot of these lights, because I have been doing a lot of testing, that because I put them in an open rack system, so I see they go straight down. But like you were explaining, with a lot of your lights in these smaller tents that you have them built for certain size tents, you get a lot of reflective off of that. What basic heights do you have when you talked about the recipes and these blues and like dialing these? Do you have like a recipe for these growers? Like, because I mean, for me, I know I'm learning a lot what you're talking about, but like 6 months ago, I was like, huh? Tune what? So like, how are we helping these growers? Like, I mean, how is this?
Yeah, since we really only do cannabis, it's pretty well dialed in for the color spectrum along the the life cycle of the cannabis plant. So we give you recommended settings, the standard, and just the thinking about it. The blue-red ratios, especially, is what you're playing with. So it's pretty straightforward. You give you a basic recipe during the whole cycle, kind of a week by week recipe, similar to what you do with nutrients.
Okay.
You mentioned another thing, and that is the hanging height. A lot of cases, well, it's really different. These spider type lights, you know, with the multiple bars, you really have to get those very close to the plants. Um, they don't function that well once you get higher, but if you've got narrow, limited overhead space, you know, it's a pretty good solution. But the trouble is those are all very directional. So, you know, if you think about a plant, they get those big fan leaves that, especially with a fixed light that doesn't move, eventually they're going to camp out and capture all the light that's coming straight down. They're not getting much light from the side. So we actually believe that it's better to do either use more lights higher up, or if you're in a tent, go as high as you can and let it bounce off the walls. So if you're using multiple lights or high ceiling in the tent, now you've got photons bouncing all directions, and those fan leaves can't really camp out. So you're getting much better penetration into the canopy, much more even plant growth, and overall better yield. So, you know, you know what the inverse square law is? Everybody talks about, you know, if you go up by a factor of 2 higher, your light goes down by a factor of 4. That's the inverse square law. The higher you get, it's going down. You're getting exponentially less light. That's why if you don't have reflective walls, if you're too high, you're losing a huge percentage of your light. But if you've got reflective walls, like in a tent or in a grow room with reflective walls, or if you have a lot of lights intersecting across a big space, you don't really lose the light because you're just getting it from more angles. So one plant might see several lights, or in a tent, the plant's seeing photons bouncing all over from the walls. So you're getting much better penetration and much better yield in general. So that's the biggest difference between a spider style light where they're really close in, but you don't get very good penetration, and it's kind of a horizontal level of light.
I actually just tested the spider farm light, and it was 21 by 24. It's PPFD. Shit, you can look it up. It was like 705. So I was looking at its height at 2.5 feet. And like with most of these lights, as soon as when I take the spectrometer outside, I lose it. It's gone. It just appears. So I ran some other lights. We did some testing, and probably show this at the end of the show here of some of the lights that I was just recently testing. And they're powerful lights and they're very well known, but I mean, they say it's going to cover a 5 by 5 area. And 3 weeks into flower, we had to actually add another light to that area and to increase that yield, because we were realizing it had, you know, it was about 900 ppfd. 2 feet over, it was at 300.
Right, and that's the problem when you use a single light with no reflection, you know, so close, you're not getting a lot of reflection from the side, and you know, especially if you're like 2 feet high with a spider light, you're losing most of your light. But it's really about getting more angles and not losing any light off the sides. But if you're talking about light levels, you know, PPF is that's the rating of the fixture itself. That's telling you how many photons does this fixture put out in total. PPF, that's the most important number. PPF number, compare one fixture to another. That's the number. It's not wattage, doesn't matter. You know, PPFD is a totally different thing. It's PPF. That's the total number of photons that fixture can put out, right? So if you compare a light that puts out 500 ppf compared to 1,000 ppf, that's twice the light, right? So then PPFD is the measurement of how much light you have at a particular location at a particular distance, right? So that the spider guys will say, oh, you're going to get, you know, 1,000 ppfd at 12 inches or something.
So this is the Gavita LED. That's their 1700. That's at like a foot. So that's what you're talking about. So this is leaving the light source. This is just, like I said, this is a high powerful one. I'm measuring it very close because at this point I was looking at the amount of photon. I was outside playing with the spectrometer, so I'm inside playing, right? So I was trying to understand different things.
And especially with those lights, the height will change dramatically, the PPFD rating. So you really got to be pretty close to get that high light level. You start to go up, it drops way off just because of that spider design. But, you know, where if you have a more narrow focused LED, you could put those much higher, and then you're getting a nice footprint, you know, at a particular height, you get a nice 4x4 footprint or 5x5. So it's a little different in how you measure the light. And you're trying to get it even everywhere. The spider is only even at really close, you know, 12 inches, whereas a more powerful, smaller footprint will be, you can hang it 3-4 feet high and you've got real nice, even PPFD across the surface. But, you know, if you talk about how much light does a cannabis plant need, most people, you know, below 500 reading, 500 micromoles at PPFD level, that's kind of below that, you're not getting buds at all, or you're getting little popcorn buds. As you know,
moles per kilo would be so low at that point, right?
Yeah, that's kind of where, if you have less light than that, you're not going to get any yield at all. And then from 500 all the way up to, I would say, about 1200, the yield goes up, more light, more yield, more light, more yield. After 1200, it starts to drop off. You get less bang for your buck, and it probably shuts off at about 1500. Whereas if you give it too much light, the plant actually shuts down, you know, to protect itself, and you'll get less yield. So, you know, they don't like that extreme. You know, there is a limit, but, you know, so most people want to push it up as much light as possible without going over that threshold. So
I'm guilty right here, right now. Crystal heavy, 1400 ppfd, 3 inches away. They were fantastic. Stigmas open up, growing like a madman. Throw them in the flower, boom, light stress, everything from the house. And then from there, it was just, I went into more mistakes and stuff like that. And I learned that, I understood that now. So that's what we talk about is the amount of PPFD these plants can handle. Cannabis is a high PPF plant. It can handle up to 2000 PPFD at any given time during the day, but only 30 moles per day is what I'm understanding. So
well, we do a lot of stuff with greenhouse, and the DLI is how much light you get over the day, over a whole day. And, you know, that translates to PPFD, but times those number of hours, right, over that surface. So recommended is like 45 DLI. That's a lot of light. That's like Southern California in the summer. You know, you get 45 DLI, and if you went out with a light meter, you probably hit around 2000 PPFD.
Yeah, no, yeah.
And it's 2000 everywhere, right? The sun is incredible. It's everywhere. Cool. So that's kind of what the guideline in the greenhouse, DLI of 45 is kind of optimal. Much more than that, it's getting too much sun. And then as you drop down from that, your yield will slowly go down. Just still do well, you know, 45 to 35 is kind of the sweet spot. And that translates to a PPFD, you know, you're kind of in that 800 to 1200 PPFD.
I'm actually looking at about 30 moles a day. So I mean, dialing mine down to about 750. I'm at 756 actually on PPFD at 11 and a half hours a day, puts me at 30.32.
Yeah, no, at 750, you're still going to do pretty well. It's really as you drop down, you start to get towards 500 and the yield goes like that, you know. But spectrum is important too. You know, DLI or PPFD, that's just photons, not telling you what color, what spectrum it is, because you know, you have efficiency peaks with photosynthesis. There's a peak in the deep blue, there's a peak in deep red, and that's the most efficient photosynthesis in those light spectrums. So that's why those have the biggest bang for the buck. It's in blues and reds. You still have some photosynthesis in the middle and the yellows and greens, but it's much less efficient. So you'd rather have most of your power in red and blue zone. You know, that's why HPS is good, because it's got a ton of power in red. So it's a great bloom light, you know, very efficient. A metal halide has a huge spike in blue. So it's a great light for veg, for chemical profiles. That's right. But when an HPS bulb gets old, it shifts you know, a new HPS bulb is nice and red. It's got a lot of punch. Even after 6 months, it starts to lose pressure and it moves towards the yellow. So it'll shift spectrum as the bulb gets older. Pretty much it's all over in the yellow, and the photosynthetic efficiency can drop like by 50% with an old bulb compared to a new bulb. The advantage of LED is it doesn't shift. They stay put, and you know, for 10, 20 years.
Well, that's the best thing about LEDs. And like I said, I actually started with a Spectrum King LED, their high bay light, 2014, I think. It was about 2014. And then grew with that for a long time, enjoyed that. So seeing what LEDs are going today is amazing. I love how you have the wireless controllers, and you have, like, I haven't seen that yet. I'm able to start dialing that. Like for me, I understand. So I would actually put far red a little bit in VES just to get them going, boom, just to kind of induce, get them going, get some bigger leaves happening, then hammer them again. So I'm looking at different ways of growing, and what you're telling me, your lights have that technology. You can actually add that all to what you have going on.
Yeah, you know, and traditional growers have known that kind of stuff for a long time. So they'll tweak the spectrum to make flowers be long stem or short stem. Blue light even changes the color and the smell, so they'll finish in blue. So, but every plant species is different. So cannabis is very, very specific to how it responds to light. So we try to build that into all our lights, so you kind of maximize the way, you know, that plant uses light.
So, I mean, California LightWorks, I mean, you guys been around, like I said, since 2008. You guys have, you've really gone into it. I'm hearing lots of great stuff. So we know what, like, where's the future of the company? Like, what do you got, some big horizons, some pretty cool technology coming out? Are we all waiting for, like, the new iPhone comes out? Is it going to be something better? Like, do I have to upgrade? I mean, it might be good for 5 years, but you got to come up with better light in 6 months. And
well,
being this grower, am I have to?
The first thing is, you know, LED is like all electronics. You know, they always used to say computers doubled in power every 18 months at half the price. You know, so the power just went up. LED is not quite as dramatic as that, but every 6 months, you know, we talk about efficiency of any light, and that's micromoles per joule. Yeah. It's kind of like, it's close to saying ppf per watt. It's not quite the same, but very close. So you can look at a light and say, oh, if it has 1,000 ppf, you know, it's
Sanford Spectrum King's like 1.82, and some other ones are, I think.
Yeah, see, that's very low. That's very low. We're up to 3.4 now.
What? I've never heard that in my life.
The reds we use now, latest generation is 3.4 micromoles per joule. The whites go up to about 2.8 now. You know, an HPS is about 1.7. So, you know, in those days, the Spectrum was about as efficient. And already in the lab, you know, the LED diode manufacturers are saying in the lab, they're already at 4. So you can figure 4 micromoles per joule on LED, and HPS is still stuck at 1.7, and it's not going to get any better. It just is what it is. LEDs are, you know, we're just about almost double now the light for the same amount of electricity. You're getting double the light. So it won't be long till the only advantage of HPS will be that the fixture's cheap, right? But you're going to use so much electricity that it won't make much sense. It's much better to invest in LEDs, and you get your payback really quick.
Definitely. So, I mean, I was on your YouTube channel and actually researching you. So, I mean, California LightWorks, where are we finding you? Like, how are we learning more about the company? Tell us more about you, your Instagrams, your Facebooks. Do yourself a shout out. Tell us all about where we can find you.
Yeah, well, we do a ton of social media and online digital marketing. Our website's full of videos and technical studies and lots of photos of case studies on different grow rooms, different approaches, lots of testimonials, a ton of stuff on the website. We had an Instagram page, a Facebook page, which is really active. And people can buy from us directly off our website. We also have distributors in Canada, especially out of Edmonton and Toronto, and not so much in BC. So that's probably why we don't have as great a distribution there. But easy to get. If you look online, you can get it online, even from our Canadian distributors, really fast.
There you go. Well, that's pretty awesome. Like I did, like I said, I haven't seen them around here at all. I've been doing all kinds of different light testing. I'm going to be uh, testing an HLG up here pretty quick. I'm pretty excited about that to see what it's able to do. I'm really looking at the LED technology and where it's going today. Canada's a
What?
whole different cat, of course.
Well, you should, we should hook you up with our Solar System 550 along with a controller. That's by far our best seller. I mean, all over the world. You should, we should get you one of those.
I'm looking forward to getting it. I am totally because I'm definitely getting that information. I got the spectrometer here. We're gonna do the testing. We'll show the world exactly it's
Yeah.
doing
So
everything.
after we hang up, you should have my email there. Send me your address. I'll send you a sample. No, it'll blow you away. It's incredible.
Well, I'm really looking forward to like I say, it's the green rush for the industry right now. LEDs is the future of growing, learning all about this new technology and what people have to offer and where they're going. I mean, it's like I would say it's like driving a car. And you're gonna jump in at any point. When you get in, you can start. What engine do you want to drive? Car do you want to drive? And that's what these LED lights are like. They all have different size spectrums, different drivers, different engines. Some of them are 4 cylinders, some are V6, some are V8. We get any commercial, some are Rolls Royces, some are Ferraris. And it's kind of what you're looking at. So it's the best way of explaining LED lights to people right now and really taking a really good look at them. I really want to thank you for coming on the show and explaining more of what you're doing down in the US with your company and going over your website. I saw some great things there that people can look at. And I'm really looking forward to featuring you on one of our shows with
Just check it out on CaliforniaLightWorks.com and appreciate the time talking to you.
Well, you have a great one. Thanks very much, guys. And of course, you can check us out on all our different shows here on Pot.tv. On Monday, we have the 420 Lifestyle. On Tuesday, we have Neil with THC show. We have Greg on Wednesday with True. Well, that was actually, I was going to say Neil's show. That's Marijuana Man. Of course, I'm here on Fridays, and you can find BC Bud Girl during the days there on Thursdays. I think she chimes in once in a while. Some other shows. Always, guys, keep growing. Do what you love to do. Plant those seeds. Get those lights. Grab whatever you need to do. You can't put half, but you can definitely one and pass one to your friend. You guys all have a good one. And we're going to show you this one lights that we just finished testing. We tested a Mars Hydro against a Spectrum King LED, of course, and that's what I was just talking about. It didn't have, watch this video. You guys are going to have an enjoy there and take a look at this and definitely check out LightWorks and everybody else. And happy growing, guys. Peace. So now they're off, and it's just you and me. So.
Okay, here is the best part about what's happening here, guys. Is see that light behind this? This one here? I don't know if you recall this, but Mike went and picked up his new light. He bought that sucker. It was a 315 watt. And Mike, how was that 315 watt grow for you?
It was okay. I mean, I got a good crop out of it.
But wait a second. No, you didn't have this one behind you. So
No.
now you think. So was it like your best one?
It was the best crop I had when I first started really growing and discovering it, and I discovered with that light, and that's when I got a really good grow. It was like at 460 gram or something like that.
So and then you
Almost
just
a gram.
started using the auto pots.
Yeah, that's the difference all in the world. If the pots do themselves, all work.
There you
just
go.
feed the schedule.
And you were using greenhouse seed nutrient
Yes,
on that,
I was.
right? So now I see you have the Spectrum King LED. I gave you this sucker over here because we wanted to upgrade you.
Yeah.
And we're having some fun, and we're doing the PPFD testing. I don't know if people have seen this before, but we're going to show you what we have. You've seen it. You got to go at the 2 feet mark.
Here we go.
Mike is having some fun here. So we're actually hit this thing at the 2 foot mark, and we're 476.8 PPFD. Now, if we move that over to the wall, we're going to talk about this. So if Mike went over to that wall over there, 321. There's really nothing. And if we go 2 feet to the other side, once again 369. So you're not really getting a full foot coverage. And you started seeing that about 3 weeks into your grow.
Of course, yeah.
And what did we do?
Well, we went ahead and we decided to throw in a Mars light and companion them together.
And what did you feel how the Mars was doing? Like, did you do well? Let's talk about this grow that you have here. Like, Wow, look at all this. I don't think you've ever had this many plants in here.
No, 8 plants was a big job this time, but with the auto pots, it made it so much easier. It really did.
Right, and then so now you did a Spectrum LED. We see that spectrum, guys. We see what's happening there, the 2-foot mark. Now the Mars Hydro light, I tested that light out in veg, but I wanted you to test it out in flower because you used the Medi Kush, and I wanted people to see these different lights. So let's plug that Mars Hydro light in, and we'll do the spectrum there. Okay, so the Mars Hydro light, did you figure it was like bigger, or to give you more lumens? So we're gonna.
I think it's a lot brighter in the whole sense, and the buds on this side I think were a lot bigger proportionally than this one over here.
They were bigger on that side?
I think they were. I mean,
I never heard this before. This is awesome to hear, Mike. Thank you for your opinion.
I've never seen, well, from my grow, my last grow was nice. It was really nice. And this one was even better than the last one. And I was surprised at the size of the heads as the buds were coming out.
On this particular light.
Particularly the side, yeah.
Well, let's look at the spectrum together, Mike. Why don't you hit that button there with the thing finger? Yeah, you can just hit, yeah.
Gotta take the dust so to see that.
Wow, so the difference is that 671, but see a little bit more red in there, a little bit more blue. So you're seeing a little bit difference in that spectrum. So here, I'm gonna hit it with, because you got to keep that meter straight. There you go. So that's 701, 734. So it gives you a little bit difference with the Mars Hydro light. Now let's go 2 feet forward onto this side. Over 2 feet.
Here.
Oh. Here you guys go. Over 2 feet. And this is 269. So really it's directly underneath. And then if you go to the wall, that's 417.9. So you're under 400. So these lights are great for veg, because what we're seeing right now, we're getting that 500 to 600 ppfd on an 18-hour day. We give us roughly our daily light intervals, Mike, to be roughly about 30. So what I saw was Spectrum King, and so now we got to see these 2 lights, and we're looking at Mike's ceiling up here, and I think we're gonna throw in an alias red. What do you think? And maybe it'll cover the whole room, because I know the power of that light, but it needs high ceilings, and if with that head red is up that high, I believe it's going to give a full coverage in this room. So we're going to take out the Mars Hydro, we're going to take out the Spectrum King, we're going to try the alias red, and then I'm going to be testing another light with Mike, maybe. So this is going to be our light testing room, and Mike's going to be part of these tests, and we just saw that because I wanted to hear it right from Mike, and I saw what I saw in this room, and I've grown with both of these lights, but not in flower with the Mars Hydro, but Mike said that he actually got some pretty good yields on this side, and I'm going to be able to try that bud and see what that's like. So, you know what, coming soon will be all these test grows. Me and Mike are going to be running in his garden, in my garden, to see different lights over the next little bit. So, are you ready to do some adventuring with some LEDs?
Let's do it, man. It's a journey.
Let's get this done. This is a journey, and we're going to continue growing here with you guys. Coming up next, our next light. So we'll see this next, and the growing with Mike and John. We're back.